Welcome back to the podcast. I'm Lewis Hatchett, and in this episode, I'm going to be talking about why imposter syndrome isn't necessarily a bad thing, and also how you can overcome it should you be feeling it. I'll talk around some of the issues that imposter syndrome brings, but more importantly, how you can deal with it when it does arise. Let's get straight into this episode. So chances are that if you felt imposter syndrome, then you felt it when you were perhaps giving a presentation, or you've moved up a level in whichever team or environment you're in. Maybe you've become a leader and you've started to feel this sense of imposter syndrome coming in. And imposter syndrome is when we feel we're not good enough, or we maybe have this narrative around what happens when they find out that I don't know as much as they think I do, or I don't know enough to be validated at this level. I'm not good enough to be at this level. And even just saying that out loud, like how damaging is that for us? To be saying those words outside of our minds is insane, that we're saying it over and over again within our heads, because I have felt a sense of imposter syndrome for sure. I feel it most of the time when I'm giving podcasts and I'm delivering stuff on here, and I have to remind myself constantly of where I'm coming from, and I'll give the reasons as to and how to overcome this sense of imposter syndrome towards the end of this podcast. But we tend to think that with imposter syndrome, we think that there's going to be this moment when someone calls us out for not knowing enough, when they genuinely find out that we don't know enough as they think they do, that we don't know enough as much as they think we do. Maybe I'm getting that wrong. I'm not sure. But essentially, it never happens. We never get called out for what we don't know. We have found ourselves in a position where you have got a sense of credibility. You're perhaps, like I mentioned, leading. You've perhaps moved up an environment and people are looking to you for your insights and listening to you. And so when we have that moment of imposter syndrome, we perhaps feel like we're not credible, but actually we're in a position where we usually are. Imagine if you didn't feel a sense of imposter syndrome, right? Imagine if you felt like you knew everything, or you even knew someone that thought they knew everything. Maybe you already do know someone that is like that. But you would just be walking around blissfully unaware and not progressing because you're not aware of the things that you don't know. And that's what is actually great about imposter syndrome, is that you actually know the things that you don't know. You know what you don't know. And that comes from a base of good knowledge, good awareness, again, a sense of credibility, because you've built up a base of knowledge to get to that place. So when you do feel that sense of imposter syndrome, it's from a place of, I know a bit, I know probably more than a bit, but I also know what I want to learn and what I want to get to know more of. And I just haven't done that yet. And we feel like people are going to call us out on all that bit that we don't know. And we forget all the stuff that we do know. And that's what really the basis of this podcast is going to be about, is about remembering the things that you do know and that make you credible in those areas. Because that's the sort of antidote to being in imposter syndrome, is feeling that sense of being credible. We want to feel credible. And I've mentioned it previously in other podcasts, especially if you go to episode 129, where I spoke about perfectionism. The idea of imposter syndrome stems from this feeling of we want to be perfect. We have really high standards or even high expectations for ourselves. And we have this sense of wanting to be really good and perfect in that area of expertise that we want to show, right? But that coming with it has this sense of not being good enough and comparing ourselves to others. And when we strive for that perfection, we also have this need for wanting to be accepted within the tribe. So being accepted amongst everyone else. And with that, we then start to focus on the external. We start to look to be validated through external senses, through our self-image. It could be this perfect image of ourselves and that we want to portray, right? But really, the antidote for feeling that perfectionism is just being okay with being imperfect. And that would be one of the parts to helping overcome imposter syndrome, is be okay with not knowing everything. be okay with having that sense of imperfection and being slightly different. And you don't have to know everything to be credible, because people will perhaps want to listen to you or want to know you or even select you if you're in a sporting team based on the experiences, what you've done in the past, and not necessarily what you don't know, right? They're going to want to see what you've got currently and then value that. So it's worth remembering that what you've got currently is valuable. But ultimately, don't worry about not knowing everything just yet. Like I said, you know what you don't know, and I'm sure you will seek that out. So only those people who feel that sense of imposter syndrome are knowing what they don't know, and they're striving to get better. So it's a good place to be. Again, if you didn't have imposter syndrome, you'd just kind of be blissfully wandering around thinking you knew everything, and you wouldn't have that opportunity to grow. So like I mentioned, you do know what you don't know. So how do we overcome this sense of imposter syndrome? If we know that feeling it isn't necessarily all bad, but we still want to overcome it, then what are some of the things that we can do in order to overcome it? Well, I've pretty much just got two things for you, which is essentially to write down what is making you feel like you're an imposter. Ask yourself questions like, what is it that you feel you don't know that would make you more credible if you did know? And then when you maybe write down some of the reasons as to why you may feel like an imposter, like I don't know enough, I'm not good enough, I haven't been in this field long enough, whatever it might be. Has anyone done that before? Has anyone been in your position before? Chances are they have, because everyone feels like an imposter to start with. And do you know that to be true, right? Do I even know these statements that I'm writing down to be true? What justified this thinking, and what sort of examples do I have that I know this is to be true? So write down what it is that you feel is not making you credible enough. Do you know that to be true? Is this thinking true? And what do I need to know in order to feel more credible? That might actually just end up helping you find a bit more of a to-do list and to go and learn list if you want to feel better about yourself, because if you do that, then I'm sure that will create a sense of confidence. And then the second thing is to just note down some of your positive experiences, the knowledge that you do know. What is it that you do know in this field? And more importantly, what unique aspect do you bring to it? Whether it's your personality, the way you do things, whether it's the skills that you have that you've acquired over time. Maybe it's even the story that you have and where you've come from. Using your story is a really powerful way to build credibility in what you do. I actually use it all the time for myself. I know that there are loads of people out there doing, whether it's mindset coaching, whether it's teaching, it could be something like meditation to an athlete, but it is also things like podcasting. There are loads of people out there, but no one does it the way I do it. No one is me the way I am me. And no one has had my story to get to this place. So I use stories as a way to build that credibility, but to also build that connection with others. And you can do that as well with whatever it is that you're in. So write down where you've come from, the stories that you've gone through, just whether they are big, long stories or short stories that have happened quite quickly. Those little moments in your life will build up and be a unique way of looking at the world compared to others. And that can be a really big selling point for you. And not only that, it'll just make you feel good about yourself. You'll feel more credible because you know, I've gone through some stuff to get to this place. And so writing that down. And then I reckon really as a little added bonus to this is just to, like always, stop comparing yourself to others. Use that little moment where we spoke about stories and your journey that you've gone on so far. Use that to recognize that your journey is just unique. Your journey is your journey, and you're not going on anyone else's journey. So you don't need to feel like an imposter because you're perhaps comparing where you're at with where someone else is at. So don't worry about that, and just focus on where you've been, what you've learned, what experiences you've had, the unique view you may have in that field. And that will help bring that feeling of credibility to that subject, as well as asking yourself those questions as well. So bit of a short podcast this week, and just something that I know has come up from whether it's listeners or people I interact with, clients that I've worked with. We have this sense of imposter syndrome. I know for sure that I have felt it. And I hope that just whether this last few minutes has helped alleviate some of your worries about it and maybe given you a bit of a plan on how you can overcome it. Be sure to reach out if you do have any questions, or there's perhaps more you want to learn about this, or if you're interested in a certain subject that you want spoken about on the podcast, then go and find me on Instagram at Lewis Hatchett. You can find me on TikTok as well, Lewis_Hatchett, and even just reach out on the website, lewishatchett.com. But thanks again for listening, and I'll see you guys later.